Welcome. I am Asa Lanham, the Chief Executive Officer of Innovaro, and this is the sixth part in our series on innovation for executives. In this session, we're going to take a look at the investigation step in an innovation process. If you recall from our earlier sessions, we talked about the four I's of innovation: ideation, incubation, investigation, and implementation. And we previously talked about ideation, how do you generate ideas, and incubation, how do you take those ideas from nascent things into platforms, into business concepts. In this section, we really want to look at investigation, and I will caution you in advance that this session is longer than the previous ones, and that's consistent with the fact that the investigation phase often takes a lot of time as compared to ideation and incubation. The fact is that investigation really is one of the toughest parts. You know, there are times it seems to take forever. You've got this idea, it's wonderful, you want to run with it, but you can't quite seem to get all the questions answered that you need to in order to move forward. But the truth is, there are a lot of items and a lot of issues to deal with before you start making investments and really putting money into something. And there are a lot of unknowns. But the reality is that we're really only going to answer 5 questions. All right? There's only 5 things we really want to know. The first is there a market? The second is there a product? The third is, can we build it? Fourth is, can we deliver it? And the fifth, which some people say is the first, is how do we make money? But sometimes you don't know how you make money until you look at those other things. So let's take a look at some of these in sequence. Let's take a look at, is there a market? When you're trying to determine if there's a market, one of the first things you got to look at is customer needs. Who is a customer? Dogs don't buy dog food. Their owners do, but dogs eat it. So are you selling to the dog's owner or are you selling to the dog? The answer is the owner's going to buy it and the dog's going to eat it. So you've got to satisfy both of those. And part of what you're looking at, is the problems and the needs and how they're solved today. We use the dog food example. What do people feed their dogs today? Is it wet food? Is it dry food? Is it table scraps? Do they let them, rummage? What do they do today? Because your new idea is going to go up against what they do with those today. And then the third part of that is really, what are the alternative offerings that they have? What can they do about doing that? So it's not just needs, but if you're going to do something, what can someone else do? So customer needs is first. The second part of it is you want to know what your market landscape looks like if you're going to try and figure out, what you're going to do about the marketplaces. How is this marketplace organized? Do people sell directly? Do they own their own stores? And we've all seen lots of examples of a variety of market organizations. The petrochemical industry is one that's both complex and has been, vertically integrated, and it's been disassembled and everything else. Very, very interesting. Second thing is you want to know who are the suppliers. These fall into a couple categories from a supplier standpoint. They are, who are the ones that supply different parts of the marketplace? Do they supply them to consumers? Do they supply them to companies like yourself? Where do they fit? So you've got to know who the suppliers are when you do your market landscape. You've also got to take a look at your future trends and scenarios. Where are people going? We know the cost of gasoline for our cars continues to go up. The discussion about buying trends in electric cars has gone on for a period of time. And we also know that people have different values in that and what they think is important. So we've really got to figure out what the buying trends are and where people are going to go in the future with that. We also want to take a look at your basic consumer trends. If the fact is they're buying electric cars, but they're buying smaller cars in order to reduce their overall cost, you need to know those things. You need to know, again, the value proposition and how that's going to break down and how many of those you have as candidates. And last but not least, you need to know the financial trends. Are people investing more? Are they investing less? I just heard a thing on one of the public radio stations the other day that the millennials have a very different relationship with credit card debt than the generations that have gone before. They're more casual about incorporating or taking on credit card debt, and they're more casual about paying it off, particularly as they come out of college. And that's going to cause some of the financial companies possible problems in the future, is how they deal with that, how they tighten up their rules. The other thing you need to really do then is you've got to take a look at your value proposition. What are the real benefits you bring to the customer? Right? Is it happiness? Is it saving money? Is it a better quality product at the same price? You better know what your benefits are, because if you don't, someone else will figure them out for you. And you also have to know what the cost is to the consumer. We go out all the time and eat in restaurants, and there are a lot of different price points and there are a lot of different benefits. The old analogy is good, fast, or cheap, pick 2. right? So, if you're good and fast, then you're probably not cheap, and if you're good and cheap, then so it's those kinds of things that you have to really look at in terms of cost, because that's going to drive consumer behavior. And last but not least is the aggregate delivered value. We've all bought things that we couldn't cost justify. So we do that. We buy them because we enjoy them. We buy them because they have intrinsic value to us. We buy them, for a lot of reasons, but there's a value proposition that's in there, and you have to understand what yours is. Next real area to look at is second question is there a product, right? And this seems like a pretty simple question, but in a lot of cases it's not, because somehow or another you've got to conceptualize your product. We talk a lot about prototyping. I think prototyping is extremely important. If you can bring someone something, sometimes it's only a picture, and put it in their hands and they can see what it is, they get excited about it. And the fact is that, I'll talk a little bit about, a modular construction toy. This is a toy that children can use and children can assemble to make structures out of. Right? So we all know what a modular construction toy is. Well, do we really? Because here are 5 different modular construction toys. And believe me, there is a technical specification for each one of these. And what the consumer wants and what they do with them are all different. And by the way, there are probably a lot more than this 5 that you may know. And then last but not least is you've got to experiment, because you're going to take it out, people are going to try it, they're going to say it works or it doesn't work, or this is great, or this is in the wrong position, or the thing gets too hot or the thing gets too cold. So you've got to experiment to conceptualize the product, to get it in front of enough people to say, yeah, this is the right thing, right? Then you've got to take a look at your industry mapping from a product standpoint. So how is your company going to be positioned relative to others? And this graphic happens to relate to the delivery of news, right? And think of how the delivery of information, the delivery of news has evolved from the original print media into radio, into television, into the internet, and the blend of all of those. Where do you get your news from, and how is it delivered, and who gets it, who collects it? So knowing that industry mapping and the company positioning and where you fit will be important. You've also got to take a look at your market structure in terms of your suppliers and your buyers and your channels. And that really is, okay, so who are the people that are going to supply you the materials you need? Who are the other suppliers to the marketplace? Is this direct to the consumer? Is it to mid-markets? We all know from a lot of the press, the fashion industry, what's actually delivered in the stores and how it gets there and who produces it and where it comes from has got a pretty complex chain and a pretty complex set of channels. So you've got to take a look at your market structure. And then last but not least, in industry mapping, part of what you're really looking for here is the white space, right? And a white space is one of 2 things. It's either an unserved need, this is something that people need that no one produces today, and many times these are the unspoken needs, or it's underserved. There's some stuff there, but it's really not good enough. And the reason white space is so important is when you enter a marketplace, you have to decide if you're going to create a new market, which is expensive, if you're going to serve a white space, which is the best entry point, or if you're going to go in head-to-head with competition and you're going to try and take dollars away from another competitor, again, which is very expensive. So white space analysis is very important in industry mapping. Then you've got to do your competitive analysis. We talked about alternate solutions. Well, if you can think of one, so can other people. And so if you've done your industry mapping, if you've done that, you're going to look at not only what you have, but what other people can do to bring that to customers, and what are your alternatives there, right? You've got to take a look at your suppliers again, right? Who are these other people? We get beverages in all kinds of containers in all kinds of places and all kinds of times, right? There's hot beverage containers, there's cold beverage containers, there's closed containers, there's open containers, there's glass, there's metal, there's paper. And these are all, alternate solutions from different suppliers, right? So your key there is to figure out what's your differentiation. Why pick you? Right, and this has got 2 things in it. One is comes back to the value proposition. Why is our value, why is our benefit greater than others? Now, that often actually manifests itself in the classic, competitive analysis kinds of things, which is this is what we do, this is what others do, this is where we're better, this is where we're worse. And you really do have to go through that. It's not just a fuzzy exercise. It really is something that looks at that. And then last but not least, what's your competitive advantage? and is it sustainable? We have an example here of light bulbs. We know that there are light bulbs that are out there that you can buy that last much longer than existing light bulbs, right? They're also generally a bit more expensive. Sometimes they're a lot more expensive, and from my own personal experience, I'm probably not going to spend money on a 10-year light bulb. I've only lived in one house for 10 years. And, I don't take my light bulbs when I move. So I want, maybe 1 or 2 year light bulbs. But the other part of that is that a sustainable advantage. Can you maintain that? Right? An unfair and sustainable advantage is a great thing. And you've really got to figure out what your competitive advantage is, whether you can do it. I personally get asked, can other people do what we do? And you have to answer that very frankly. Sometimes the answer is yes. Is it a matter of time? Is it a matter of money? Is it a matter of market size, interest? But you've got to know what that is, right? The next question then really is can we build it? Can we build this product? And that's sometimes a lot more complex to answer than you might think. Do you have the skills? Do you have the capabilities? Do you have the productions? But if you break it down, what you're really going to start to look at is your competencies. And this is where you get into SWOT analysis. What are your strengths and weaknesses? What are the opportunities and threats? And you can do these relative to the marketplace, but if you look at them from the aspect of competencies, overall, it gives you a good place to start to decide, can we build this? Can we do it? Second one you really want to look at is what are your core competencies? Is what you're predicting or what you're projecting to build and deliver something that fits in your sweet spot, something you really know how to do and you've done a lot and you can deliver it and you're confident with it, right? And then last but not least, you've got to take a look at your supply chain partners. They're the ones you're going to rely on to build that bridge from where you are to success. And supply chain is very, very important to understand as part of your competencies and where you fit and where your partners fit. If personal experience, involved with one of the big computer companies. I came in, was responsible for helping to get them into a new segment of the marketplace. They picked a technology that sounded great, but it turned out that the people that supplied the technology really couldn't build it. They couldn't build it in the volumes at the prices that we needed. So we had to change. We had to go to a whole different technology in terms of what we built the computer out of, and that's important to understand. Technology landscapes. This is all about if you're gonna build something, what technologies do we need? And this can apply everything from clothing to computers to beverages. Do I have manufacturing technologies I need? Do I have fabrics that I need that don't exist today? And if not, where am I going to get them from? Where's this going to come from? Right? Where's the landscape going to go? If I've got this great idea and I'm going to build it, and there's a new technology that's going to come along that's going to obsolete it, then the real question is, what do I do about that? Do I incorporate that kind of stuff? Got to look at the technologies you have, and there are a number of good companies out there that do technology mappings, right? They'll look at your technologies, what you have, how they relate to others out there, and those kinds of things. So you've got to know what your technologies are that you can apply to the problem, because that's going to go into your cost of production, your cost of manufacturing, all your delivered costs, your cost of goods, right? And then if you've got some that are a gap, where are you going to get them, right? And what's the map of the technology where I can go get this? To actually pick up the technologies I don't have. Now, when you talk about technologies, that often relates to, intellectual property, right? And intellectual property is all about your portfolio and your landscape. And you've got to step back, particularly in the technology markets, to take a look at, what's your IP portfolio look like? What's the IP that you have? How much of this can we use? Can actually be used to protect your product, right? And we've seen some small companies take on some very large ones very successfully in the patents and that, right? And also the other part of that is what can we license or trade? Many times the more successful companies are very good at figuring out what to license and what to trade so they can get what they need. And it's a combination of looking at your portfolio and evaluating that against others. And the second part of that is what's that IP landscape look like? If we've got IP today, what do we have to worry about? If you were the best manufacturer of vacuum tubes, prior to semiconductors, you were in pretty good shape, but you probably wanted to be worried about, semiconductor, as an IP coming forward. And so then you've got to take a look at what's the IP you should acquire. Sometimes you want to own it, sometimes you just want to license it, and getting it early in terms of innovation and bringing new things to marketplace can be very important in terms of your price and the kinds of things you're going to do. And it does give you the opportunity to lock people out. And these are just a couple of examples of intellectual property landscapes. Again, there are some very good companies out there that do this work, right? Next question then really is we know there's a market, we know we can build it, then can we deliver it? And every market delivery system has an ecosystem. You know, it's suppliers, it's raw materials, it's warehousing, it's logistics, it's distribution, it's sales, it's service, it's all those kinds of things. And you have to decide where you fit in this ecosystem. And are there parts of it that you need that don't exist today, right? You know, is there something in here that you have to have that's not going to be there, right? So part of what you're going to look at is you're going to look at your supply partners, you know, and frankly, we all know that supply chain management has become a major issue for a lot of manufacturing companies. There's been a lot of money to be made there. So looking at the supply chain, everything from raw materials through distribution, through logistics, through delivery is very, very important. You've got to take a look at your channel partners. And channel partners are, you know, these are the people that can help you get your product into the marketplace. You know, from personal experience, you know, you might be focused in one geography and there's a great channel partner in another geography that's very interested in it. If you're successful and you're not going to invest in other geographies, why not do channel partners? If you're selling to one group of consumers and they're going to sell to another group of consumers, why not do channel partners? So channel partners are an important part of your market delivery capability. And then you certainly have to take a look at your own sales organization. Do we have the salespeople we need to deliver this? Do we have enough of them? Do we have the right kind? You know, I can tell you, watching again from my own history, companies moving from one market segment into another where they had a great sales force that just didn't apply to the new market segment. You know, it was a different sales cycle, it was a different buyer, it was a different value proposition. You know, it was not what they were used to. And by trying to take the salespeople that were there and move them, two things happened. One, they had a big gap in revenue that happened, and two, they weren't successful in the new sales opportunities. And it really can damage a company if you don't think that through very carefully. And then last but not least is service, you know, because products don't always go in nice and simple and easy. And I will guarantee you that if they don't, they will be returned. Right, so your service capabilities, making the client successful and happy, is essential, and you've got to figure out what the scale and the response times and the scope and all the things are that you need for service from your market delivery standpoint. Experimentation is absolutely essential in here from market delivery. You know, you've got to experiment. You know, the fact is that the greater the initial uncertainty that you have on your critical assumptions, the more experiments you better run to test them to find out if this works or not. Right. You know, I again, from, you know, direct experience, I watched a company that had a product they thought was great. They were shipping it out the doors, and this was a computer product in over 80,000 units a month in their early ramp up. They went into major production and found out what they had done is they had filled the warehouses of their distributors in those first 3 months, and they had over a $350 million write down on a product that didn't work. So, you know, that hurts. That hurts. So you've got to experiment to find out. A lot of these experiments are going to fail. You know, failure is common. You know, the ballpoint pen, I think, was first patented in prior to 1900, and it didn't actually come into production, be useful until around 1952, and that was, I think, when Bic entered the marketplace. Although the fact was that, you know, there was a group of almost 10,000 people that lined up outside Gimbels to buy ballpoint pens when they first went on sale there. They were such a novelty. You know, we think of that stuff with that, but a lot of the early ones fail. Right? Keys in that when you do it is fail fast. You know, you want to get these experiments out, you want to get them run, you want to get your answers back quickly. That gives you time to adapt and adopt, right? The second one is you want to fail early, right? You want to know early on, right? So quick experiments that fail fast, that fail early, and last but not least, certainly that fail cheap, right? And you want to have these things to go wrong early on. You know, it's interesting that, you know, Michael Jordan said that, you know, I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and missed. I failed over and over again in my life, and that's why I succeed. Expect to fail. Experiment. Get it done early. Find out how you're going to get this into the marketplace, right? So the next question then is how do we make money? And that's the crux of the entire matter for us in reality. And the issue is on market economics and how we make money is well, what's the balance? What's the balance between supply and demand? Where does this fit? Right? You know, we've got A number of ways that we can look at that. For example, you can take a look at analogies. You can look at other companies that are in the marketplace. You can look at other marketplaces. We're looking at some things that are interesting where we're actually looking at analogies in the healthcare marketplace as a way to deliver services and to manage the kinds of relationships they have with individuals as a way for us to possibly do that on our own part. So those analogies are very, very important. And how people relate to your products and how people relate to your company compared to others is important in there. You've got to do internal market sizing, and that really says how does it fit and how does it work for us? What are the drivers in here? What's the key things that make it work for us in terms of cost? If your margins get a little worse every time you ramp up production, you've got a problem, right? So it's got to fit internally. It's also got to fit externally. How big is this? And really, you're only talking about three things. It's the price into the marketplace, it's the rate of penetration, and it's the period. How long does it take you to ramp to do those things? So price, penetration, and period are absolutely essential on external market sizing, right? So, and last but not least, you'll want to look at your cost drivers. And the cost drivers are simply what are the things that change our costs. So we talked about that a little bit with internal market sizing. Can I have a change in my cost to do things? I can tell you from personal experience. I worked for a company that produced manufactured goods. They had a limited number of different ones they produced, but in the assembly they had over 240 different screws they used. And the cost to do that was costing them a significant amount of money. So they actually got an executive committee together and sat down for 4 days and went through reducing the number of screws that they used. And the savings were extraordinary. They had less to manage, they had less to order, it was easier to work with, all those other kinds of things, because they figured out that every screw that they bought, they had to have 10 times that from the actual price of the product in order to cover the cost. So cost drivers are extremely important in here. The next thing you got to take a look at is your business model, right? In business model, innovation can really require cultural and or organizational changes. And the fundamental questions you're going to ask are, who do we serve? What do we provide? How do we provide it? How do we make money? You think of electronic games. And some companies make the money on the games, some companies make the money on the consoles, other companies make the money on advertising. There's lots of different ways to do this. There's what they call long tail models, where the initial product goes out, it's relatively cheap, but it's got a long tail. So you've really got to take a look at the particular model and how do you do that. And again, it comes back again to differentiation and sustainable advantage in the business model, right? Amazon.com is very different from Sears. All right, in those kinds of things. You've also got to take a look at the fact that this is very possibly going to mean organizational change. If you've got something that's really innovative, that's really different in terms of how you deliver it and how you sell it, it may be that it doesn't fit well within your existing organization. I know one financial institution that wanted to make a fundamental change from traditional brick and mortar to internet, and they found that they couldn't do it within their own organization. So they literally created a new bank and let the new bank actually have the old bank's customers as contacts to go to convert them over. And they made a lot more money and a lot better margin by doing that. So the organizational change can be very important, but they couldn't get there from where they were with the existing organization. You've got to take a look at roadmaps. There's a saying that I like that if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. All right. And without a roadmap, you're just kind of wandering around. Roadmaps provide some very fundamental things. One, they provide direction. Which way are we going? What's the direction we're heading in? They're going to provide action. We need to do this in this time frame. Now, any roadmap is going to have things that it bumps into that's going to change it, but you've got to know direction and action. The third one you got to know is you got to know results. If we're going to move from one place to another, if it's going to cause us to happen, what's the results we expect to obtain, right? And that means that you've got to have measurability. You've got to be able to take a look at what happens within the roadmap. Did we get there? Did we get what we meant to do out of this whole thing, right? And then unknowns and assumptions. You've got to take a look at your unknowns and assumptions. Confucius said, "We do not know what we do not know." I think actually Donald Rumsfeld said that as well in more recent history. But the fact is that there are a lot of unknowns, right? What we should do is we should identify what we know that we do not know. right? So what are the things we don't know that right now that we should be planning on figuring out how to get to know those things? And then the second is we should be prepared to deal with it. There's a, what someone said, a reality check ahead, right? We went out, we tried this, and guess what? They liked it or they hated it, right? And they move forward from there. So that's really all I want to say about this. I really appreciate your time and the length of this one, and I look forward to seeing you in our final session on implementation. Thank you. Goodbye.